Hello and welcome to Clock Spinning, the podcast of Magic's history as told card by card. I'm Austin, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Connor. How are you today, Connor?
I'm doing pretty well today. I spent a little time on the roof this afternoon planting some cacti up there, creating a little paradise for probably not birds, but something.
Well, since you're already gracefully segueing into it, do you want to talk about today's topic?
Yeah, that almost connects to today's topic, which is the art of Birds of Paradise, one of Magic's most iconic cards, and I think we can safely say most iconic bird.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So we've got another art review here. We're going to look at every piece of unique art that's ever been printed on a Birds of Paradise, starting all the way back in Alpha and going up to a very recent printing. And we're just going to go through and review them on kind of the YouTube S to F tier kind of scale and talk about our favorite birds.
Yeah, it's a little bit fun because there's either 8 or 9 or 10 unique arts, depending on how you want to count them. So you'll just have to see what we mean as we go through here, dear listener.
Little mystery.
Ooh. All right, well, our very first Birds of Paradise art goes all the way back to Alpha. Yes, all the way to Alpha, first set in the game. This piece is by Mark Poole, and it's super unique. Oh, and I should say, we're not going to describe each of the arts because that would get really tedious. If you're listening on the podcast, there's a link down in the show notes that'll pull up a Scryfall search to show all the art, so just take a look at that. But anyway, this art has a really unique backstory. I think this is one of the more famous bits of Magic trivia. This card was not in the original plan for Alpha. It came into play very, very late. And the reason is Mark Poole turned in this art for a land. There's some dispute about which land. Mark Rosewater says Tropical Island, but lots of people on Reddit and other forums say that Mark Poole said it was just a normal island. But either way, the art director, or Richard Garfield, again, depending who you believe, took a look at it and said, there is way too much bird in this art for this to be a non-creature card. This can't be an island. And so they hurriedly cooked up a card for it, and lo and behold, an entire archetype of Magic cards came into being. Now, Alpha, of course, has Llanowar Elves, so the idea of a 1-mana green creature that produces mana was there from the beginning, but the idea that you would break out of the color and generate any color of mana you want. This is actually like the only effect in all of Alpha that does this. Just tap for any color of mana. So really unique card, came about in kind of a fun way. You could see that hurriedness on the card, I think, with the text box, which says flying / tap. And so on, which is very funny to look at.
I do definitely want to get back to the art, but the rest of the text box actually does not say that you can add a mana of any color. It just says tap to add 1 mana to your mana pool.
Oh no, you're right.
It doesn't say it can be any color.
Oh no.
So that's really funny. A rush job. But yeah, the little / there, which I guess must have been supposed to indicate a line break, just hanging out right next to flying. I love that.
That's a great call. Yeah, actually, you're right. And in beta, they revised it looks like, to add any color to your mana pool. Alpha is full of lots of funny typos like this. If anyone's as big a nerd as I am, there's So Many Insane Plays podcast did like a 50-hour special reviewing every card in Alpha with a tremendous amount of trivia and history. So go look it up if you want to know more about the actual history of this card and its play in Magic.
It is wonderful. But let's get back to the art. I do love how prominent the birds are here. They probably, like square footage wise, I think they take up close to the same amount of space as the island itself, if you leave out the smoke or the volcanic ash.
Yeah, I really like this art. It's simplistic in the way that a lot of Alpha art is, but it's very beautiful. I like the color scheme here. I like the way the birds pop against this blue background. There's a little bit of a like these black objects down in the water. It's hard to tell if they're little like reefs or islets. Islets? I've never had to say that aloud. Canoes or something. But anyway, honestly, the whole thing makes me feel like I'm in Hawaii or something. And it's a really beautiful image.
I had always interpreted those smaller objects as more birds, just further away. Yeah.
Let me take a look-see up close here. I think you're right. I think they are more birds.
It's more birds. So Mark Poole actually did also paint every actual island in Alpha, along with the real tropical island, which basically just looks like the islands. There's very little difference between any of them. And a card called Island Sanctuary, which is an incredibly weird white enchantment. So basically anything having to do with islands in Alpha seems to have been Mark Poole's job. Yep.
One of the other fun things about this art is that this has been printed like at least 19 different times across history of Magic, this art. And Wizards seems to be incapable of reprinting like any of the original alpha art without messing with the contrast and saturation and brightness. I don't know why. It's very frustrating. But it means you can look at a bunch of variants and decide like which is your favorite of the Mark Poole Birds of Paradise. Is it the dark original alpha? Is it the slightly lighter beta? Is it the slightly lighter still unlimited? Is it the kind of comically washed out and flattened World Championship edition? I could go on, but I'm worried that it's becoming boring. But it is worth looking up just how many different ways Wizards has interpreted this exact same art.
We'll see. I think a more egregious example of that kind of art tinkering coming up very soon here.
Very soon.
How would you rate our very first Birds of Paradise art?
I mean, I'm very biased. So, I mean, if this was printed today, I wouldn't give this rating. But for the story that's attached to it, for the kind of quiet beauty of the image, and for its just numerous printings and iconic place in the history of Magic, this has to be an S tier for me.
Yeah, it's an S for me. I genuinely like the art too. I think it's very fun and innocent. It's like almost something you'd see on the wall of a dentist's office in a good way.
Yeah.
It's just kind of calming.
I think I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Yeah. One other kind of fun thing about this is, of course, if you want to get this in alpha or beta, it's about $3,000, which is a chunk of change. But as I said, this has been reprinted a million times. So you can get like recent printings, including in like Dominaria Remastered. You can see this printed in an old frame for a lot less. Now, of course, you won't get the hilarious alpha text or the original super iconic border, but you can get pretty close.
Okay, should we move quite a bit forward in time to a 7th edition Birds of Paradise?
Yeah, it's a big jump.
Okay, so this one is by Edward P. Beard Jr. from 7th edition. You can see here that it's a rare. You couldn't see that on the original alpha card. I'm sure I'm going to return to this several times this episode, but from this Bird of Paradise onward, no Birds of Paradise art has featured any more than one bird, as far as I can tell.
Oh my God, I've never noticed that. You're right. You're right.
I have never been able to not notice that. It always bothered me so much when I was younger, when we started playing this, and I think the first Birds of Paradise that I saw was the Ravnica printing, and I was like, what? There's only one bird here. Why is this Birds of Paradise? But from 7th edition onward, there's just a single bird.
That's interesting. I feel like generally Magic cards are one creature. I think just somehow it makes more sense for things to be singular. But you're right, that's awkward with the name here.
Yeah. And I mean, it seems like it would be a pretty easy problem to solve. Just put a few birds in there, and they could be Birds of Paradise.
Yeah, but with this elaborate plumage, like asking Edward P. Beard Jr. to paint 2 birds with that plumage or 3, that's a big ask.
That is a lot of plumage. But actually, the first thing that I noticed about this art, and the thing that I can't unnotice now, is that this bird basically has a beard.
Do you think that's a little in-joke from Edward Beard? It feels like it must be.
It might be a little self-referential thing here. Put a beard on the bottom of the bird.
It 100% has a beard.
There probably are birds out in our own plane that have
beards,
something like that going on. But I mean, that's a very beardy kind of. Would you call that plumage when it's on the bird's head?
Well, it's not on its head. It's on its little bird chin, which is unusual.
The chin of the bird.
I feel like there's a lot of birds that have like mohawks or some other little thing on top of their head. I feel like below your chin is a little more unusual.
Yeah.
Because your ladybird couldn't see it as easily down there. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know the evolutionary reason why beards maybe are more uncommon.
That checks out to me.
All right. Good.
So other than the beard, what strikes you about this bird?
So I got, from an art standpoint, I like this, but don't love it. I don't find this compelling, and it's hard for me to put my finger on why, because I think it's like beautifully executed from a technical standpoint. It's like very colorful, but it's also pretty naturalistic. The brushwork, the rendering kind of throughout here is really beautiful. The lighting, like the fact this is done in traditional media is super impressive. I don't know, somehow I also find it boring is too strong, but it doesn't grab me. And it feels compositionally, it feels a bit inert to me. Like all this foliage intruding, I don't get a sense of motion from the bird. It feels like the bird is just sort of, it almost reminds me of, you ever been one of those old fashioned museums that have lots of like stuffed animals in dioramas? That's kind of the feel I get here. Like it feels like there's a painting in the background and a bird suspended by a wire in a diorama. That's kind of how I feel about the composition. Like, I think it's a beautiful piece, but it doesn't have a sense of motion and life for me.
That's a very good description. And now, just like the beard, I can't unsee that. Unsee this as just like something suspended from like some little fishing line in front of a painting.
There's some interesting side story with this card. We'll get to this more in just a second. But this card was part of a big falling out between the then Wizards of the Coast art director and artist Edward P. Beard Jr., who'd done a lot of magic art before this. This piece was cited by Wizards in a, like, I don't know, conversation, I guess, with Beard, where he asked, like, why aren't I getting as many pieces anymore? And they said, this is, quote, too traditional fantasy, unquote, the specific piece. Another Wizards employee supposedly said to him, this is what the art of magic should not be about this piece. And then described the style they'd like him to execute on as, think of our new magic as Matrix meets magic, which is about the most like 2001 thing I've ever heard.
I would love to see the card that epitomizes Matrix meets magic.
Oh man, I think this thread, I'll link this thread for anyone who wants some ancient 20-year-old drama. But I think this thread did cite some examples. You know, it was all this like Mirrodin, like shiny comic booky art that Magic went super hard on in this era.
Do you think that if Edward P. Beard Jr. had put a leather trench coat on the Bird of Paradise, that it would have made it through?
I think that would be a great altar for this card, like a super, super in the weeds reference altar on this card. It would look adorable.
Well, it looks like we could get a 7th edition Bird of Paradise for $13, so...
That's right, unless, Connor, you want it in foil. So 7th edition foils are nutty expensive. This is, I believe, it was kind of hard to verify this, but from what I can tell, this is the most expensive foil in 7th edition, and it will set you back about, in decent condition, $3,000 or more.
Oh my god.
Which is to say, this is as expensive as alpha. This is as expensive as an alpha rare to get this thing in foil, which is mind-blowing to me. I'd always known that 7th edition foils are expensive. Like, we found in our Counterspell episode that like a Counterspell 7th ed foil was like $150 or something nutty like that. Mm-hmm. And so apparently there's a couple of reasons. The biggest reason is the biggest source for foils for the last 20 years of Magic, but especially in like the 2000s, was a program Wizards used to run called Magic Redemptions on Magic the Gathering Online. So when Magic the Gathering Online first rolled out, there was a worry that players would say, I don't know why I would spend real money on digital cards. That sounds like a scam. Because it was really pretty new, this idea that you would just spend real money to get like a bit flipped in your account.
I still feel that way sometimes.
When I play Arena, I certainly feel that way. And so Wizards had this program called Redemption where you could collect a complete set either in foil or non-foil and then file a request, and they would remove all the cards from your account and mail you that set you just redeemed. So you could collect... Yeah, this was a thing for like, I think a decade or more. So you could collect, for example, all of 7th edition in foil and then file a thing, and they would permanently delete the cards from your account and the MTGO economy and mail you a complete set in foil.
What?
Yeah, and that was the big source of foils in this time. And it was also how MTGO grinders, it was like the underpinning of the MTGO economy. It was like the gold standard. You know what I mean? It was like it was backed. All your digital stuff was backed by real cards at some level.
Whoa.
But the problem was, back then, as recently, but especially back then, the kind of enfranchised player who was playing on Magic Online did not want to open packs of 7th edition. They wanted Mirrodin and Scourge and all these other cool sets. And so basically no one opened it. And so the only supply, there wasn't much supply from MTGO Redemptions. It was basically just supply from retail boosters. So that's one reason. And then the other reasons are, core sets used to have white borders, except in foils, starting with 7th edition. This was the first time a core set was printed in foil, and the foils came in black border, and it's still the old border, and Wizards did unique art for many of these 7th edition cards. So you have this like perfect storm here with Bop of very, very few foils in old border, unique art by an iconic Magic artist. It really wasn't printed in a non-screwed up, we'll talk about that in a second, form again, of a very desirable iconic card. So you put all that in a blender, and I guess that adds up to $3,000, Connor.
Wow. Yeah. That's quite a saga.
It is quite a saga.
Which one would you rather have, the alpha or a foil 7th edition?
Oh, that is such a good question. I think I'd go with the alpha. We'll get to this in the ratings, but I mean, this is kind of more I don't know. It's kind of like a Lamborghini versus a Porsche 911 or something. Like a Lamborghini is flashy and cool, and that's how I feel about this. But I mean, come on, the 911's a classic.
All right. I hope we have more car comparisons as we get
I'll
into
have one
future
car for
birds.
each printing.
Yes.
Don't hold me to that. What about you, Connor? Alpha or 7th edition foil?
I think I would go alpha also, just because I love really the text box in alpha. I love the art
I think
too.
I
but
like
just
the text boxes more than the art.
It's fantastic.
Alpha is full of that kind of weirdness. My favorite, forgive me, another tangent. My favorite bit of alpha text box weirdness, and there are many, is Unsummon, where there was like a find and replace error very, very late in alpha production. And so the alpha printing of Unsummon accidentally uses the word card instead of discarded. And so the text box says, return creature to owner's hand. Enchantments on creature are card, in all caps, ed. Unsummon cannot be played during the damage dealing phase of an attack. Anyway, I just love our carded. That's such a great. There's so many typos in alpha, but those are two of my favorites.
I love that.
All right, should we rate this thing, Connor?
Yeah, I guess we should get around to that.
I'm like a B. It's fine.
Yeah, I've got it at a C. I don't love this as much. Like, to me, other than the taxidermy nature of it, like the wings look a little awkward to me. The head's kind of big. Like it sort of takes away from the birdness of the bird of paradise. So it's around a C for me.
Yeah, it's a nice piece of art. It just doesn't speak to me somehow. It doesn't grab my heartstrings.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's immediately revisit this same piece of art in a newer border Birds of Paradise from 8th edition. This is the same art by the same artist, but a little different. So we've got a bonus bird here that, unfortunately, in my opinion, is a much worse bird than the one we just looked at.
Before you explain why it's different, I want to invite our listener to pause for a few seconds and see if they can spot the difference. Okay, welcome back. Connor, what is the difference? What changed?
Well, several things, but the most egregious change is this weird fringe of black, like jet black color on the very edge of the bird's wingtips. It's kind of inexplicable to me why this was added. You can see that a bunch of other things were changed in the art here. The like contrast, the saturation, the brightness all look like they were cranked way up. Like someone just took all the sliders in Photoshop and just pushed them all much further up, because that's how I view Photoshop, is like basically a soundboard where someone's pushing sliders around. And then there's this weird, like diseased looking black fringe to the feather tips that is very off-putting.
Yeah, all I can think about the black fringe is that it's meant to show that the bird produces all 5 colors of mana. But what's weird about that is the art already does that. Like the wings are yellow, which I take to be the white mana, blue, purple, which I take to be the black mana, as it so often is in Magic, like in many Liliana arts, red, and green. So it's already got Wubberg wings, but I guess the purple wasn't Wubberg enough, or maybe they were concerned this confirms the rumor of purple as the 6th color. I don't know, which was rife at this time for some reason. Aesthetically, honestly, if you didn't tell me this was added, I don't think I would have noticed it, although it does look kind of cruddy. I just think it's a cruddy thing to do to the artist to really lazily Photoshop their art. Like the black isn't even like incorporated into each of these lovingly built feathers. It's just like a line down the end of the wing.
Yeah. And it feels different from the, kind of minor saturation and brightness kind of shifts that you see to a lot of other art that is reprinted, because there's like an actual modification to the art here. And the whole tone of the background looks pretty different too.
I think it's worse to paint over the art. And honestly, this like slider moving business that WotC likes to do when they reuse art sometimes really drives me bananas. Like here, I feel like they've turned up the sharpness so much that it's essentially a different piece of art. Like all of the kind of soft subtlety, which according to Edward P. Beard Jr. was what WotC did not like in his art style, has been forcibly removed. Like the subtlety has been stripped out of this art in favor of this like almost pointillist level of like sharp contrast.
They red pilled the bird.
Oh my god, they red pilled this thing. Supposedly, this is according to Reddit, so take this with the giant grain of salt. But supposedly, this was kind of the final straw for Edward P. Beard Jr. That timeline roughly works. He stopped working with WotC around Ravnica, which is around when this was printed. And he has not done a single piece of art since then. Even as Wizards has brought a lot of retro artists back into the fold, he's never worked with Magic again in the last 20 years.
Wow. So do we rate this one?
I rated it. I wanted to give it an F just as a kind of historical, to give a little bit of historical justice to the artist here.
Oh, let's give it an F. Maybe we can have a big klaxon sound effect to mark how bad this is. Think about getting that in there.
I'm sure the listeners would love it. All right. Speaking of Ravnica, let's go to Ravnica now. Next up, we have Marcelo Vignali's piece for the original Ravnica set. And I really like this art. It's the beginning of a trend, which is only going to accelerate from here towards more and more fantastical Birds of Paradise. So our first two birds from Alpha and 7th edition are pretty naturalistic. I mean, they're, in the case of the 7th edition, it's obviously maybe a little too colorful, a little too wild, looking to be a real bird, but it could pass. This thing, it could not pass. It is this fluorescent pink that kind of leaps off the page or leaps off the card, and then this beautiful golden yellow color that also sort of shimmers and shines in the art. And that tropical trend, or that fantastical trend, is going to continue. And I don't always love it, but I gotta say, I really love it here. I just think this art is so beautiful. It's so colorful. There's so much technical skill on display, the light on the bird. And I like also that the art here is like set in Ravnica. Like you can see these Ravnican buildings in the background, but it's not like Ravnica in your face. Like it's not shouting at you. It's just like subtle little Ravnica background here.
Ravnica in your face.
When they're starting to run out of ideas, that'll be our like 7th return to Ravnica. It'll be the WWE crossover set. Ravnica's invaded again, this time by WWE.
By pro wrestlers.
Poor Marigmos cage match with The Rock. It's coming.
I hope Birds of Paradise are there too. I also quite like this art. It has this really nice like sunset sort of colored plumage.
Yeah, it is sunset.
Yeah, it's like it's not as on the nose as the beard Bird of Paradise. You know, we don't need to have every one of the 5 colors on the bird to know that, you know, this is a magical bird that can produce mana. I do like that it's not Ravnica in your face. It could be distinctively Ravnica, and it can fit very well in that set. But it doesn't have to be. You know, this could be printed in any number of sets and fit in just as nicely. This is also kind of I would say the most iconic Bird of Paradise for me, which I suspect is true for a lot of people, since this is still sort of the bird of choice for reprints, or at least has been until pretty recently. Though, of course, you know, this card hasn't been standard legal since 2012, I think. But I remember hearing, probably like actually at the Ravnica pre-release that we went to, that this was going to be a money card in Ravnica, and that, you know, this was a big reprint, and it was going to enable these multicolored decks, and everyone was going to want Birds of Paradise. And I don't think it really registered in my brain at that point that this card had existed in the game since day one, or even that like reprints were that much of a thing. It just kind of seemed like a cool bird that would make it easier to, you know, build the like Golgari Ravnica theme deck that I wanted to do in 2005.
Birds has this interesting reprint history where it appeared in literally every core set from Alpha through 8th. So it was in Alpha, Beta Unlimited, Revised, 4th edition, 5th edition, 6th edition, all with the Mark Poole art. 7th edition, we get the beard art. 8th edition, we get the beard art. And then it's not in 9th edition. They print 9th edition in summer of 2005. There's no Birds of Paradise. I have no idea if this attracted attention, but I imagine it might have. And then it makes its triumphant return like 4 or 3 months later in Ravnica City of Guilds, where it's so appropriate as this like 5-color or multicolor enabling card. So I think that's a nice little bit of storytelling through the block structure. And this was the first time Birds appeared in a non-core set. It made that most difficult of leap from a like core set card to a like real expansion, which I think is a hard jump, especially for a card this old.
And then it leapt right back to core sets after that.
That's right. Yeah, after this, it was in M11, M12, and then, as you said, hasn't been in a standard legal set since then. I think because there's a surprising number of these alpha cards where Wizards didn't realize for like a decade or more in this case that a card was either too weak or too strong. And I think Birds is a little bit too strong for standard. But during that final standard run, this was, as you said, the art. This was the kind of classic key art.
Where do you land on this classic art?
It's a solid B for me. I praised the background. I do feel like the background and the bird don't entirely feel like they're in the same place or plane to me. Like somehow doesn't that part doesn't quite fit for me. But I really like it. It's like a I'm gonna go up to an A. It's a solid A for me.
Actually, we should add the flavor text in because this is our first bird with flavor text.
Wow.
I'll read it out here. It says, long ago, birds of paradise littered the skies. Thanks to the city's sprawl, most now exist as pets of society's elite. I don't love that.
See, I have in my notes, I really like that.
What do you really like about it?
I like that it tells in 2 sentences this story of like Ravnica was once a real place that wasn't completely covered in city, and now it's sprawled and they're super endangered. Like there's a sort of sadness and darkness to it that I like.
Yeah. I guess it kind of ties to the background a bit, because my first thought, as you were talking about the background just now, was that it's kind of weird that there's no trees, like there's no greenness in the background at all. It's this very sort of gothic looking,
because it's Ravnica,
medieval
Connor.
structures. I know it's Ravnica, but there's plenty of trees in Ravnica. I see trees in Ravnica, and there's just none here. But I guess the flavor text kind of ties into that a little bit, and it's like there's these birds are at great risk, and there's not enough habitat for them anymore, which is very sad as I'm saying it aloud. But I still don't like the flavor text very much.
To me, it makes me think of this as like a peacock. You know how like there's some like neighborhoods will have peacocks just wandering around? That's the vibe I get from this art. And this
I used to live in one of those neighborhoods, so I guess I had some birds of paradise.
So I'm an A. Does the flavor text somehow drag it down for you? Where do you land?
No, I landed an A too. This is a beautiful bird, and I can't go lower than an A for it. Okay, next up we have a bird from Magic 2011 promos by Terese Nielsen, with flavor text that says, the gods use their feathers to paint all the colors of the world. Yare Tiva, warden of Grammar Forest. And there's also a very cool watermark in the text box of this Birds of Paradise, which is the color pie. And not to give too much of a spoiler, but I notice Austin does not have a very high rating for this bird, and I would love to know why.
I'm really struggling to understand why. So I'm like a D on this. I really feel like I should love it. Like I like Terese Nielsen's art. She's done some incredible pieces. I mean, Force of Will and its various descendants, most notably. I kind of like the moody color scheme, but I don't know. I just find this like too busy. The bird doesn't feel right anatomically to me. Like its wings feel kind of tacked on. I don't know. I just find the whole thing like too bombastic and confused. It's like floating in a just featureless cloud. Something about it just doesn't work for me on any level. Except, I think apparently all the M11 promos, and there were like 4 of them, had this. 2 of the M11 promos, had this color wheel watermark. And boy, is that a great watermark to have on a Bird's Paradise. That's cool.
Yeah, that is pretty sweet. Aside from the anatomical issues, which I agree with you on, the wings seem like kind of too small and too pigeon-like for the rest of this bird.
Well, and too far off to the bird's left. Like they don't feel like they emanate from its back to me.
Yeah, you know what this looks like? There are all over the city of LA where I live, there are these paintings of angel wings on walls, like the walls of buildings or the walls of, famous places you can go. There's these big wings painted on there, and then the idea is you stand in front of the wings to have your picture taken with these angel wings, because it's the city of angels. And this does kind of look like this bird, this wingless bird, has been propped up in front of one of those sets of angel wings.
100%. Also, the idea of a wingless bird with this giant tail, something about that's so sad.
It is, but it has its wings now. All of that said, I kind of dig the ridiculous rainbow plumage underneath, and this weird, sparkly, cloudy background. Like I don't really understand what's going on here, or why the bird looks like this kind of amalgam of colorful pieces and then these gray wings. But it works for me somehow.
I don't know. It's almost like there's like a teeny bird in the middle, like a teeny sparrow in the middle, sparrow-sized bird with additional wings behind it, and this tail. Like I just feel like this piece is so technically confusing to me, or like not technically, like the biomechanics, I guess, of this piece are so confusing that I can't enjoy the like wonderful riotous Terese Nielsen colors in the way I want to.
I think maybe you just need to look at it from look at the bottom half only.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I actually zoomed in until I could only see the bottom half. And I love the bottom half. I think it's great.
See, there you go.
But I can't I can't judge a piece of magic art that way.
Okay. Did you already say your rating? What do you have this?
Yeah, I said D, and I think I'm sticking to it, even though I think it's like let me think of a tortured analogy. Give me a second here.
Mm-hmm.
This is like if you made a really great flank steak seasoned with fish sauce and ginger, like a kind of Asian seasoned or like Vietnamese seasoned flank steak.
Sounds delicious.
And then you made an exceptional batch of like homemade spinach and cream ravioli.
Are you just describing your dinner?
No. And then you combine those in one plate.
Oh.
That's how I feel about this art, meaning there's a jumbled bunch of things that are all individually really beautifully executed, but the whole it doesn't work, and I can't give it a high mark. Just like if I was a judge on MasterChef and someone presented that plate to me, I would say, I don't understand what you're thinking. And that's how I feel about this art.
I thought you were going to end that by saying that it came with like a side of an unseasoned baked potato. And that's like that's the equivalent of the LA here. Wings and background here.
No, I even love the wings. I love all the constituent elements. I just don't think this makes sense as a single piece to me.
That's fair.
I don't want to drag you down. What's your rating?
Here's what I'm going to do. I came into this with a B originally, a capital B. Mm-hmm. But since I only really like the bottom half of this art, I'm going to give it the bottom half of a B, which ends up being a capital D. So it's a D.
Oh, what? Sure.
That may be my most tortured rating yet, but that's what I feel.
That's even more tortured when we rated something like 11 cents. But let's move on. All right, next up, we have the first of several Secret Lair drop Birds of Paradise. This is from the Ornithological Studies Secret Lair drop series, which might be my favorite. I really regret not picking this one up. So this is like a realistic kind of 19th century Audubon style drawing of a bird. It looks like something you would see in a naturalist guide from the 19th century, or you'd see like a print at a museum. And I think it's beautiful. Like on a technical level, I think this is really stunning. I'll be honest, I love this kind of 19th century scientific art to begin with. So I am grading perhaps a little bit unfairly because I'm responding to the inherent style. But I think the piece itself is gorgeous. First, I love the way it nods at this style of illustration with the foliage that's here, but like super secondary to everything else that's going on. I love the hyper detailed like plumage that helps you get a feeling for the bird's anatomy and construction. And speaking of which, I love that the anatomy actually makes sense here in a way it hasn't on some of our previous birds. I love the colors here. They're really powerful and exciting, but just tame enough that you could almost imagine this bird minus its tail existing in our world. And then this is going to sound funny, but I just love this peach wash background. I don't know why. That's really basic, but it makes me think of Alpha in a really good way. I don't know. I think this is an incredible piece of art. It's really pretty.
I really love the background too. Like that in some strange way that jumps out to me the most about this. And
I don't know why, but it's really a critical part of the appeal for me.
It sort of reminds me of like a page from an old book that's sort of yellowed a little bit, but it still has this beautiful, color print in it. Totally agree with everything you said. This is a fantastic piece from a really cool Secret Lair drop. And actually, I went back and read the announcement for this drop again, which is also pretty great. It says, of all of Magic's fictional creatures, birds are far and away the most popular. First invented by Richard Garfield in 1987, birds eventually made their way into Alpha via the powerful Birds of Paradise card. We thought it would be cool to envision what birds would look like if they existed in real life, so we commissioned some naturalistic, classical illustrations from Ovidio, Cartagena, and Alan Douglas.
Is this a reference to that birds are not real, like Reddit conspiracy theory?
I don't know, probably.
I feel like it must be a little bit. Also, I can't believe we forgot to mention back in Alpha that this is the first bird in Magic, which is pretty cool.
It is. Actually, the Alpha printing says summon mana birds. Which is also...
Does that mean it's got the type mana and the type birds in Alpha, or is it a single thing? Who knows?
I don't know. Every word on that original Alpha card is so
slightly
good.
Wrong. I'm surprised it doesn't say flies instead of flying.
Yeah, this is an easy A for me. I love this one.
I love it too. I think I'm going to jump up to an S tier. I had it as an A,
Ooh.
but I was listening to how excited I got. I think it must be an S.
Okay, follow your heart. All right, so next up we have another, actually a pair of Secret Lair drop Birds of Paradise. This is part of a drop called the Extra Life, or I guess the charity is called Extra Life. Basically, what Wizards did is it worked with some children in, I believe, the Seattle Children's Hospital to put together some really wonderful pieces for kind of iconic Magic cards like Birds of Paradise. Sliver Legion is another from the same drop, and Lathless Dragon Queen. And if you haven't seen this Lathless Dragon Queen art for the Secret Lair drop, please go look, because it is phenomenal.
Click the link.
I guess I should explain what the promo actually was. So the children drew their own version of the card, and then a professional artist went and tried to basically faithfully recreate the art that the child had drawn. So this Bird of Paradise is done, it looks like, in maybe colored pencil and marker by Eli or Ellie, age 8. Was recreated by Andrea Radeck, and it says age 35 on there, which I love, as a professional looking piece of Magic the Gathering art. And I really appreciate that even Eli or Ellie, age 8, recognizes that a true Magic the Gathering Birds of Paradise card only has one bird.
Yeah, I love this series. I think it's such a fun. I feel like the kind of curmudgeon part of me should hate Secret Lair drops because I complain about so much recent Magic stuff, but I kind of can't hate them because so many of them are inventive and fun like this. This is such a fun concept. And then the execution is so great. As you said, nothing is going to beat the Lathless one. Go look at it if you can't. The original kid's drawing is hilariously basic because it's by like a 4-year-old, and then the professional realization by Tyler, can't read his last name here, by Tyler something, is probably the funniest single piece of Magic art. But this one is I would say this one is pretty good. The original art is like very ungainly, or implies a very ungainly bird, and the artist fully leans into that. Like, this bird's torso is gigantic, its neck is super tiny. So the proportions here are really silly, and I realize it's the point of it, but for some reason it's not as funny to me as, say, Lathless. It just sort of looks awkward. I feel sad saying that, but that's sort of how I feel about the professional realized version of this.
Yeah, the professional one, like it almost feels like it could just kind of be a Magic card if a couple of things were changed, like if the tail was less shaped like a flag. Which, and I do appreciate that the artist here recreated the child's shape of the tail, which is really more like a beaver's tail than a bird's tail.
It's huge.
It's huge and very, very flat and just ends in a line. So I really appreciate that. But if you kind of took that tail out of the equation and then maybe bent the right side of the rainbow, which doesn't really follow a curve because Eli or Ellie's version of it did not. If you take those out, it could just kind of be a sort of silly looking bird card.
Well, the other thing is, I feel like Eli or Ellie's original implies that the rainbow in the tail is connected to the rainbow in the background. Doesn't it? Like, maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like there's such a strong thematic connection in the original piece that I feel is a little bit lost in this. Like, to me, it's just like it's got a random rainbow in the background, and I feel like there should be some communication between the tail and the rainbow here. I feel like the bird is creating the rainbow in the original.
I feel like it would be. I'm not seeing the direct connection between tail and rainbow, but I think you're onto something. If we get into the mind of the artist.
Yeah, exactly. Unfortunately, I don't know that she's available for interviews. I've always wondered, this is a total aside, but I've never found anything describing like how they told the kid what to draw, and I would love to know, because obviously they couldn't show them the art. So how did they describe it? It'd be super interesting to know how that description got translated into the finished piece.
Yeah, I wonder. If you look really closely at the bottom of the professional version, if you look at the trees near the bottom, like the bottom left corner of the art here, they're more in the foreground than the tip of the bird's wing.
Oh, wait, what the heck?
And when you look at that proportion, it makes it look like this bird's wingspan is like 200 feet, which is actually
Yeah,
kind
wait
of
a
funny.
second.
So
What's going on there?
I do sort of like that part of it. It looks
Do you
like
think that
just a
was
bird.
intentional, like a little tiny joke from the artist?
I think it must have been. It looks like this tiny bird, and then you look more closely at that detail, and it's like, wait, this thing is like bigger than a dragon.
Wait, I'm so glad you pointed that out, because that, if that's intentional, which I think it must be, that's super funny. It does look like this bird is like several hundred feet
It's like a
long, which is
jumbo
pretty
jet.
cool.
Yeah, I like that.
Huh. Hmm.
So what does that all add up to? And are we rating these separately or as a pair?
I don't know. I think we should not rate the child's piece because I don't want to sound churlish.
That does feel kind of bad.
Okay, I'm just gonna not rate the kid's piece. I was a C. I think I'm gonna bump up to a B just because of that scale thing. I think I wasn't giving the artist enough credit here for the humor that they've introduced into this piece. So I'll give it a B.
I like that. I had it at a C, but I had the original piece at a B, and I do like the suggestion that this is a giant bird. So yeah, let's go with B.
Sounds good. This has been a really strong episode so far, Connor. Like we've done a few of these, and I don't think we've had a hit rate this high in any of our previous art reviews.
Yeah, we've got a lot of pretty birds here.
I feel like it must just be a fun. I mean, might sound silly, but I feel like some of that maybe it's just a fun one for the artist, right? There's a lot you could play with. You basically need to have a really colorful bird, and from there, there's a lot of scope to try something fun out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, next up, let's go to promo. I guess you call it a promo. I don't know. Some special printing. Who can keep track of what anymore? But some special printing from Dominaria Remastered by Darrell Riche. Okay, this one is interesting. I'm a bit torn. On the one hand, I've mentioned I don't necessarily love how fantastical some of the recent birds art are. I think they can get a little too fantastical, and I like the realistic ones. This is so like neon colored, like cereal box deliriously colorful that I feel like I actually have to like it. He's got this purple plumage. He's got this crazy tail extending out behind him. He's in like this, I don't know, prehistoric children's cartoon foliage. Like it's just so over the top that it makes me very happy.
I love every part of this bird of paradise. These colors are just like explosive and vibrant, best possible way. It almost looks like it might have been done with like pastels or like really rich oil colored pencils or something like
It
that.
feels very traditional media to me. It doesn't feel digital.
Yeah, and like not even a painting. Like it looks like media that we don't typically see in a lot of magic art outside of maybe like a Secret Lair or something.
And you know what? The artist here, Darrell Riche, he's kind of an old school magic artist. He did a ton in our first run of the game. I never really paid attention, but he did a ton in like Vengeance, Odyssey, Scourge, Mirrodin, Ravnica, and then basically dropped off the map after Lorwyn until they brought him back in the last couple of years for just a handful of like a great Lotus Blossom art, a butterfly art that kind of looks like it goes with this. So they've just brought him back recently, and I'm glad.
Yeah, this one's just so fun and so vibrant. Like it feels very iconically green, like a green card to me. It uses so many different greens within the palette. There's this really deep shade of it in this jungle behind the bird, and then this really, really bright green right next to its head of the jungle, and then like a flying lizard that's just kind of there for some reason. And it like very clearly reads as a very green creature, but has this just blast of blinding orange and purple filling up most of the frame. And it's just like very fun to look at.
But the way that they've let artists run with much more varied styles, they're not saying this is the Matrix meets magic. There's a lot of room for artists to each have their own style and do their own unique thing. I really love that.
Yeah. So this is an S tier bird of paradise for me. I just really love this. It's just so fun to look. Like of all the birds here, this is the one I keep scrolling back to and just staring at.
Let's see that. I was a C. I think I'll come up to a B. I'm not sure I can join you at S or even A. But it's a very fun piece of art.
That's fine. Okay, our final bird of the day is the Birds of Paradise from the Lord of the Rings Commander set, I think.
Yep. Yeah, Tales of Middle Earth Commander, it looks like.
The flavor text says, "The noise of bubbling waters came up from the foaming riverbed. Birds were singing, and a wholesome peace lay on the land." So that flavor text is kind of where the goodness ends with this bird.
That
of
Tolkien
paradise
quote
for
about
me.
Rivendell.
Yes. With my sincerest apologies to the artist Ben Wootten, this really looks like some AI art to me.
Oh my god. Oh my god, you're so right.
It's just so many weird things about this art. Like the closer you look, the weirder it gets, and not in a good way. Like first off, the most noticeable thing, the right hand 20% or so of the art is just literally black. Not like there's some dark forest undergrowth here. It's like literally just straight up black. And then you look at the background a little bit and you see these buildings and waterfalls. It's Rivendell, but they don't really sit right with one another, at least for me. And even the angles of the building kind of seem a little bit weird. Like they're not quite adding up the way that they should be in our 3D meat space. And then if you look really closely, there's sort of this bridge to nowhere situation in the bottom left corner of like a little footbridge with no one on it and apparently leading to nowhere, that's just kind of hanging out in the bottom corner. And then you have the bird in the middle, which I'm sure we'll have much more to say about.
Boy, your AI art critique is tough, but I think very fair in a whole bunch of ways. First, you're right, I hadn't noticed, but that bridge just literally appears to be going nowhere. It just kind of terminates in some greenery. There's another bridge up above where, if you look, there's 3 waterfalls, and 2 of them are coming from up high, and one of them's coming from down below in a way that doesn't really make any sense with how water works.
You're right.
What is the water source for those left and right waterfalls? And actually, now that I'm looking, many of the other waterfalls in here, like I don't know where they originate. And as you said, like even the like architecture of the main house, there's a window, there's like a large stained glass window in like the right hand side of the art. And I cannot make sense in terms of right angles of how that window and its roof line are interacting with the rest of the building. It's really weird. It's a weird thing to see. This is the kind of thing if I saw that in alpha, I would be like, yeah, well, it's kind of, it's part of the course. It's a weird thing to see in contemporary magic art. Cause like I'll guarantee you this piece started as digital, which is actually another thing to get into. And therefore it's not that it's easy, but like there are tools to get things like right angles right in digital. Speaking of digital, we haven't gotten to the bird. Let's hold on the bird just a second longer. But boy, is this piece digital. Like it's packed with detail, but not in I don't know how to say this except authentic way. It's just like, it's stuffed with stuff. There's so much going on in here. It's busy. And then to cap it all off, you have this like rainbow that's sort of randomly just sitting between the bird and the background. Like, oh man.
The rainbow is so bad.
I could go on. There's so many weird, confusing things in the setting here. And I don't, I'll tiptoe towards the bird now, but this does not feel like Rivendell to me. This looks like tropical. Even if I ignore the bird, which is adding the tropical vibes, this doesn't feel very like Northern European elven to me.
It's like a tropical European church.
Yeah, yes, exactly that.
Boy, the more I look at these waterfalls, the more upset I get. Like, look at these 3 waterfalls near the bird's head. How they're coming.
Those are the ones I was talking about.
Yeah, they're coming from like 3 different levels. What?
Which is not possible given the layout there.
And
even the lowest one, where is that relative to the building? The building is the building sitting right at the edge of a 45-foot drop into it just doesn't make any sense.
And then look at the left one, like near the higher bridge that actually does kind of make some sense. And there's a waterfall like at the right end of that bridge.
I wanted to call that one out. Where is that originating?
That's just like coming out of the building?
And then the next one to the right, where's that one? It's coming out of like a balcony. It's just like coming out of the rock. Like it just doesn't.
This is really
I can't make sense of any of the spatial layout of this piece, honestly. Well, while we're ragging on it, Connor, how about the bird itself? Because I think that's where the AI art thing really comes in. Like this looks to me, like you said, iridescent rainbow bird 90s, photorealistic 4K. To Midjourney.
Yes, you've described the request perfectly. The first thing I thought is this looks like a glass sculpture that you would see in a shop in some beach town, And the sculpture, like,
Oh my god, you're
it
so
inexplicably costs like $80, and you look at it and you're like, who is buying this? Like, who wants this iridescent glass bird in their living room? And here it is in a piece of Magic the Gathering art.
I feel terrible, but I have one more thing to pile onto because, like,
let's just do it. We're all in now.
Even ignoring the art that I don't like I also dislike it, triple dislike it for 3 other reasons. One, I don't really like Universes Beyond. I don't want non-Magic IP in my Magic, although I know that ship sailed. 2, I don't like super fantastical Birds of Paradise art necessarily, and this is like mega super duper fantastical. And then 3, as a Lord of the Rings fan, this bird in particular feels way too fantastical for Lord of the Rings. There's nothing in Lord of the Rings that's like this iridescent, right? Like, Lord of the Rings' world is like grounded with these, like, even the magical things in Lord of the Rings feel very earthy and sort of organic to the world, and like they all sort of belong and nestle in with this sort of English folklore feeling. None of that feels like an iridescent bird. Like, it's
Does Middle Earth even have this many colors?
No, I don't think Middle Earth does have this many colors.
I think that there's only like 5 or 6, right?
Yeah, there's green, brown, gray, dark gray, light gray.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is just way off.
Dark blue. Yeah. I would say, to me, this art is as subtle as a flamin' hot Cheeto. Like, there's just nothing.
This is the flamin' hot Cheeto flavored bop.
This might shock you, Connor, but after all that, this is an F for me.
F seems generous. I'm so sorry, Ben Wootten, but I just can't.
It's just not working for me at any level, unfortunately. All right, Connor, before we part ways, we always like to ask, which of these Birds of Paradise would you run in your cube?
Well, with the disclaimer that I don't currently and don't plan to run Birds of Paradise in my own cube. If I did, I think it would have to be the Dominaria Remastered Super Color Blast one that I was discussing about by Darrell, Riche.
It's an excellent choice.
What about you?
I think for me, it's got to be the alpha art. I think I would pick up maybe like the Dominaria Remastered Retro Frame. Funny, we're both going Dominaria Remastered, but maybe the Dominaria Remastered Retro Frame version, or maybe one of the World Championship decks from the 90s, which I have kind of a soft spot for because they're just so singular. I'm currently running the 10E Ravnica one, which is fine, but like I feel like I got to get this iconic Mark Poole art in there.
Yeah, we've just seen some pretty special birds today. You gotta up your game.
Well, Connor, it's a good thing we got to the Ben Wootten piece at the end, because as soon as I said Flamin' Hot Cheetos, all I can think about is running down to the corner store to pick some up. So let's hurry up and close this episode out. If you enjoyed the show, you can follow it on YouTube or subscribe in your favorite podcast app. And if you did like it, comment on YouTube or Reddit, share it with a Magic playing friend or in a Discord chat. It means a lot. It's a small show, but we like to think that we're bringing in some unique Magic trivia / Cheetos talk. And so it means a lot when you do those things. But until next time, I'm Austin.
And I'm Connor.
Thanks so much for listening.